everyone, my name's Sarah. Today we're going to learn about the solar system. But first, I just want you to have a look at this picture. What do you think it is? Do you think it's a photograph of something real? In which case, where is it? Or do you think maybe it's just some beautiful artwork that someone's created? So you have a think about that, and we'll come back to it at the end of the session. So this is what we're going to cover in today's session. We're going to look at the components of the solar system. In other words, what are the different objects that are part of it? What are the different regions or areas of the solar system? We'll look at the planets, their order from the sun and their relative sizes. And we'll also learn a bit about asteroids and comets. So let's start off with something that should be familiar. Here's our planet, planet Earth. And this is where I am, and hopefully where some of you are in Ghana, West Africa. So our planet Earth is part of the solar system. What are the other components that make it up? What ideas do you have? So here are some options coming up on the screen. Do you agree with these? Do you think there are some different things that have been missed out? What do you think? So you decide what you think the components are, and then let's have a look. So we have a star, only one, and that's our sun. So our sun is a star, and it's the only star in the solar system. So when you go out at night and you look up and you see all those stars in the sky, they're outside our solar system. They're part of our galaxy. So we have planets. Of course, our planet Earth is one of them, but there are others. And we have dwarf planets. So we'll learn about the difference coming up. Then there are also moons. Our planet has one moon, of course, but other planets have moons as well. And there are asteroids and comets. So there you go. Did you get some of those right? So here's a question, should be quite an easy one for you. How many planets are there in the solar system? Are there 7, 8, 9, or 10? Get your answers ready. And let's have a look. Yes, there are 8 planets. I'm sure you got that one right. But when I was at school, we were told that there were 9 planets. So the reason there's a difference is all to do with reclassification. So we'll learn about that a bit later. Now, can you name all the planets? Do you know all the planets' names? And can you place them in the correct order from the sun? So some of you might know a special rhyme or a phrase that helps you remember. So let's take a look. First of all, we have Mercury, then Venus, then there's our planet, Earth, followed by Mars. Next comes Jupiter, and then Saturn, Uranus, and finally Neptune. How many of those did you get right? Now, the first 4 planets are called the inner planets. They're the closest ones to the sun, or they're also called rocky planets because they have a hard, rocky surface. You could actually stand on the surface. The other planets are called the outer planets. They're much further away from the sun, and they're also giant planets. Jupiter and Saturn are known as the gas giants, Uranus and Neptune as the ice giants. Now, you may have found it quite easy to name the planets in the correct order, but what about if you had to name them in size order, from smallest to largest? That's maybe not quite so easy because we don't often think about the relative sizes of the planets. So let's make it a bit easier by starting off just looking at the inner planets. So here are the 4 inner planets. I'm sure you all recognise Earth in the bottom left corner, but what about the others? Which one is Mercury? Which one is Venus? Which one is Mars? So you decide, make your decision, and let's check. There you go. Did you get them right? So Mercury is the smallest planet in the solar system, as well as being the closest to the sun. And if you look, Mars is also quite small. It's only about a third the size of the Earth. And that's quite surprising for some people because we hear a lot about Mars in the news. There are lots of space missions that go to Mars. And did you know that right now there are robotic rovers on its surface travelling around and sending back wonderful pictures? So the other planet there is Venus, which, as you can see, is almost the same size as Earth, just a little bit smaller. Now, in actual fact, this photograph is a little bit misleading because normally when you look at Venus, all you see is like pale clouds. It's covered in very thick clouds. And those clouds are very reflective, and that's why Venus is the brightest planet in the night sky. But this particular picture is looking through the clouds. It's a radar image that's looking through the clouds at the surface features of Venus. So it's a little bit different. So now let's go on to look at the outer planets. So here they are, and as you can see, they're all much bigger than the Earth. You can see the Earth there superimposed on one of them. So again, which one do you think is which? Let's take a look. I'm sure you all got Saturn right, with its very distinctive rings. But Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system. And then you have Uranus and Neptune, which are almost the same size. Now, Pluto is included in this picture, even though it's not a planet. It's now classified as a dwarf planet. But just to show how much smaller Pluto is than any of the other planets in the solar system. In fact, it's even smaller than our moon. So Pluto really is very different. So now the correct size order is, first of all, Mercury, then Mars, then Venus, followed by Earth. Then we've got Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, and then finally Jupiter. Now let's go back to Pluto. Why is Pluto no longer classed as a planet? It's now called a dwarf planet. Now, some people say that Pluto has been demoted or downgraded, and that's not really correct. It's just all to do with classification. Now, you should know that in science, classification of objects or living organisms is very important. And sometimes you might put something into one category, and then later on you find out more about the properties of that object and realize it should be in a different category, or maybe that you even need a completely new category. And basically that's what's happened with Pluto. As our telescopes got better and technology got better, we realized that Pluto was very different to all the other planets, and it's actually more similar to the very small icy bodies that are far out in the solar system where it lives. So now here you can see the definition of a planet as given by the IAU. That's the International Astronomical Union, which is the governing body of astronomy. So to be a planet, an object has to orbit the sun. It has to be roughly spherical, in other words, shaped like a ball. And it needs to have cleared its orbital path, meaning the path it takes around the sun must be clear of any other objects. So for Pluto, yes, it orbits the sun, and yes, it's roughly spherical, but it hasn't cleared its orbital path, and that's why it's a dwarf planet and not a planet. But even though it's a dwarf planet, that doesn't mean it's not an interesting place. So here are some pictures taken by a spacecraft called New Horizons, which flew past Pluto in July 2015. And this is the only spacecraft to have gone near to Pluto. And it sent back amazing images that completely changed our view of Pluto. You can see there are all sorts of interesting features. There's glaciers, there's mountains and volcanoes made of ice, and even a very, very thin atmosphere. So Pluto is still a very fascinating place that we need to learn more about. And it's not the only dwarf planet. There are 5 altogether, and no doubt as technology keeps improving, we'll probably find even more dwarf planets to keep Pluto company. So now let's go on and look at the regions of the solar system. So as this picture shows, going out from the sun, you have the inner planets, then the asteroid belt, then the outer planets, and then an area called the Kuiper belt. Now, one thing to always take note of when you see pictures like this is that the distances are not to scale, meaning the planets are not all lined up like this, equally spaced. The outer planets are much further away from the sun, but it's difficult to actually show that on a picture. So the asteroid belt is where many asteroids are found. But they're not only in the asteroid belt, which is between Mars and Jupiter. In this picture, all the different coloured dots show the location of asteroids. So you can see that there are some in other parts of the solar system. So what exactly are asteroids? Well, they're basically small rocky or metallic objects left over from the formation of the solar system. And when I say small, they can range in size just from tiny dust grains to being hundreds of kilometers across. And as you can see from the picture over on the right-hand side, they can be all sorts of strange shapes. They are not normally spherical. They tend to be rather irregular shapes. Now, did you know that an asteroid can even have its own moon? So if you look down in the bottom left corner, there's a picture of asteroid Ida, and it has its own little moon called Dactyl that orbits around it. Then over on the right is an asteroid called Bennu. Again, you can see it's not spherical, it's a slightly odd shape, and the surface is very rocky and uneven. Now, that particular asteroid has been in the news recently, and I'm going to show you why. So I'm going to play this video. What do you think is happening here? Well, incredibly, this is real footage from a spacecraft called OSIRIS-REx, which went to that asteroid Bennu, which is over 300 million kilometers away, and it very briefly touched down on the surface of the asteroid to collect a sample of the material, the rock and the dust from the surface. And now all that material is going to be sent back to Earth so that scientists can analyze it. So the asteroid belt, as I said, it contains millions, probably millions of asteroids. So you might think it looks something like this. This isn't a real photograph, it's an artist's impression. So, given that that's what we tend to think the asteroid belt looks like, what do you think is the average distance between asteroids in the asteroid belt? How far apart do you think they are? So, do you think they are 1 kilometre apart? 100 kilometres, 1,000 kilometres, or 1,000,000 kilometres apart? What do you think? So let's find out. Yes, incredibly, on average, asteroids are 1,000,000 kilometres apart. So if you could go to the asteroid belt and stand on an asteroid and look around you, you probably wouldn't see anything because actually they're so far apart from each other, which is very different from the general picture we tend to have of the asteroid belt. So now let's learn about the Kuiper belt. And this is the area that's beyond Neptune in the far reaches of the solar system. And it contains thousands of small icy bodies, because remember, this is very far away from the sun, so that's why everything is very icy. The Kuiper belt is where you'll find Pluto and some of the other dwarf planets, and also some objects called comets. So what exactly are comets? Well, they're objects made of rock, dust and ice, as we've said, found in the Kuiper belt. They can be different sizes, from a few kilometres to tens of kilometres, and they orbit the sun in a very strange elliptical path, so it's not a circular orbit at all. It's like a very stretched out oval-shaped orbit. And as they come closer to the Sun, they develop this long distinctive tail, as you can see in the picture on the right. Now, the picture is actually showing a particular comet called Comet Hale-Bopp, after the people who discovered it. And I was lucky enough to see this comet when I was living in England in 1997. It was visible in the night sky for quite a few weeks. Now, it's quite unusual for a comet to be bright enough that you can see it with your naked eye. So if you ever hear in the news that there is a comet visible, do go outside and have a look, because it's really an amazing sight. So now that you've learnt about all the different objects in the solar system, what do you think is the most important object and why? Now, you might think that maybe it's the Earth, because after all, that's where we live. Or maybe you would choose planet Jupiter, because that's the biggest planet in the solar system. But another option is maybe the Sun, because the Sun is at the centre of the solar system and all the other objects orbit around it. And of course the Sun also gives us all the light and heat that we need, and in fact almost all life on Earth needs the Sun. So the Sun is definitely extremely important to us. Now, you saw about the sizes of the planets relative to each other, but how big do you think the Earth is compared to the Sun? Do you think it's maybe this big, about half the size? Maybe a bit smaller, like this? Or even smaller still, like this? What do you think? Well, it's actually this size. Yes, the Earth is tiny compared to the Sun. You could fit the Earth 109 times across the diameter of the Sun. And even the bigger planets like Saturn and Jupiter, you can see here, they're still very small compared to the Sun. In fact, the Sun contains over 99% of all the mass in the solar system. And with that huge mass, it has a huge gravitational force. And that's what's able to keep all the planets and all the other objects in orbit around it. So let's recap what we've learned today. We have the solar system that consists of the Sun and the various objects that orbit around it. Do you remember what those are? We've got 8 planets, 5 dwarf planets, hundreds of moons, thousands of comets, and probably millions of asteroids. And then the different regions of the solar system. You have the inner planets, the asteroid belt, the outer planets, and the Kuiper belt. And remember, the inner planets are the small rocky ones, and the outer planets are the giants made of gas and ice. And the asteroid belt is where there's millions of asteroids, and the Kuiper belt has lots of small icy objects, including comets. We've also learned that the Sun is a star, and it contains over 99% of the mass of the solar system. And it's the gravity of the Sun that keeps all those other objects in orbit around it. But the amazing thing is, from here on our small planet Earth, scientists can use their creativity and their skills and imagination to design spacecraft that can go out and explore our solar system and bring back all those amazing photographs to help us learn more about the objects. And the great thing is, there's still much more to learn. Now, let's go back to this picture. What did you decide it was? Is it something real, or is it just a piece of art? What do you think? Let's check. Yes, this is a real photograph of planet Jupiter. It was taken by a spacecraft called Juno, which is orbiting Jupiter at the moment. Now, remember, Jupiter is a gas giant. So what you're seeing is all these amazing swirling clouds of gases in Jupiter's atmosphere. Quite an incredible picture, and I think very beautiful. So I hope you've enjoyed the session today and have learned something about the solar system. If you want to learn more, there's lots of resources online. One very good place to go is the NASA Solar System Exploration website. You can just Google that. You'll find all sorts of images and videos and lots of information. So thank you for watching this session and see you next time.